What's up, everyone? Zero here. Welcome back to the channel. Got another episode of the podcast for you guys. Now we are shifting over our focus to Path of Exile 2 with the upcoming launch. And today I sat down with Jorgen and we just went over some general stuff about build making in Path of Exile 2. It was a great podcast. Hope you guys get something out of it. If you guys are getting anything out of these, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you want to support the channel further, you can join the YouTube channel or the Patreon. And I also started a Discord server, so you guys should hop over. I'm trying to grow that community. All the links will be in the description. And with that being said, let's get into the episode. For people who don't know who you are, can you introduce yourself and kind of how you got into playing Path of Exile?
Oh, yeah. So I'm obviously Jorgen, which is probably on the video somewhere there, thumbnail or whatever. So I've been a Delve creator for a very long time in Path of Exile 1, but actually even before that, I was like a build curator and then became a build creator and then all the rest of all the other stuff in between. So I've been around for, which is surprising to think, I've been around for a very long time, which I never thought would actually be a thing with playing Path of Exile. Like everyone imagines. I still remember in my old job, I was like, I really wanted to do YouTube. And I just didn't know how. And then I played League of Legends for a long time before Path of Exile. But it actually, for me, started when a buddy of mine was like, oh, there's this really cool app, because we were all like, you know, big into Diablo and at that time, Battlefield and Diablo, which is really funny because we're going POE2 and Battlefield 6 coming out this year. So I couldn't be more excited with how life is going. But no, so it started with like, we saw this cool game that was coming out. And so we all bought, at the time, closed beta keys to get access, because it was just a GGG website. And so I've got like the Regal Rower pet and the Kiwi pet, which was like the original thing. So I've got the original Kiwi pet. Buddy of mine dropped like $1,000 on it and got like the gold like armor set at the time. I think it was like the Demigod's armor set or something like that, and the gold rower, original rower. But yeah, so we picked up the game, and I remember loading in, and the first part, like Act 1 was there, and the first part was when you go up to, I think it was like a Lyra or whatever it is, and you've got to fight each other. And at the time, like that's why that's in Path of Exile 1. At the time, I think the devs thought, oh, this would be a really good co-op like mechanic. And at the time when we played it, we were like, this is so cool. We have to fight to the death. Depending on, you know, who wins, that's how the quest sort of goes forward. I sort of wish at the time like that would have like progressed a little bit more into it to, you know, make the campaign more engaging. But really, like GGG was really in its early stages with Path of Exile at that point, so they were just like trying different stuff. And then I still remember when you used to do like used to farm like Act 3 and Act 4 areas, and that was how you like got enough XP to continue. Like 6 links just weren't like a thing or anything. But yeah, those were the early days. I didn't really, I played for a while, and then I went away for like a couple of the leagues, and then it wasn't until like the Forsaken Masters, I think, that's when they added like the Masters into the game and things started to improve, that I really started to get back into it. So I went away and played League of Legends, and I was like, oh yeah, this game's really cool. Played it for a bit. Didn't really get too much into it. So then, yeah, I came back like years later, and then I went, oh, well, I still remember the build that I played for ages, because I was one of those people that just logged on the standard and just kept running the same build. And it was, at the time, it was Holy Flame Totems or Incinerate Totems. So I did a Hierophant. I didn't really understand the game the way that I obviously understand it now, but it was cool. Like, you know, trade was different then. Like, that's when they showed in the video, trade you did on like the forum website, and then you would be like 1 to WTB and WTS, and then we used to do like rotas when they added like Trials of Ascension in and all that sort of stuff. So I was there for like the game as it developed and changed and patch 2 and onwards and stuff. So I was playing for a very long time, and then yeah, I decided, I was like, oh bugger it, I'm getting to the point where like I could make builds, and then I tried to put out my first few videos. And I think my first video was like tips for Path of Exile 1, because I'd been playing for a little while then. And then, yeah, I got a little bit of viewership and stuff like that. And then, you know, I went from there. I wasn't originally a Delve creator. I actually thought Delve was boring when it first came out, and I didn't really like get into it. I was just like map blasting. And then the thing that got me into Delve was there was a league reward for opening chests in Delve.
Okay.
And that gave you like, your league reward, your 40 points. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And that's when I first started playing Delve. And then I was like, oh, actually, Delve's not too bad. And then I started learning more about the market. And then that's when I got into things. But the inspiration for my channel was originally a creator by the name of Nerd Lifting Bro. And or Lifting Nerd Bro. And I don't know, he stopped making content pretty much when I started making content. But I thought his like, he did like this Slayer war totem build. And I thought it was really cool. And then he sort of started doing the curations and stuff like that, like, the build list, which is what I do now, right? And then, I saw a post and he decided that, personal circumstances in life, he decided to finish up. And I went, well, if he's not going to do that anymore, I went, well, I'm going to see if I can come up with something similar that's in my own style. And then I went, and we'll give it a punt. And then that's when the channel sort of started to take off. And then I, in doing so much research about other people's builds, you tend to learn a lot about the game, vastly more than what you would expect, because then you learn how interactions work and what builds are good for this and what builds are good for that. So that's where I started. And then ever since, obviously, as time goes, you grow and get bigger and older. I look at my old photos and I'm like, man, I was so much thinner back then. And now I got a chubby face and a beard. And back then I couldn't even grow a beard properly. And I had a higher pitched voice. And now I'm like, oh man, I'm getting old. But no, and then, so this is where I guess, we followed through. And then I did my first like league mechanic guide for like delving for divines was what it was called. Or a simple guide to delve. And I think I got my first 193,000 views or something on that video.
Oh, wow.
And then, it's crazy. I was like, this is wild. And and then the channel just grew over time. And obviously we get to now and, obviously I've been around for a bit making content and, we got a great community, the Filthy Exile community. But a funny story with the Filthy Exile stuff too. So I was a big fan of Home Alone. My dad and I are huge fans. And there was one where it's, and John Candy's Uncle Buck, and it's like, he's like, chew your food, you're a filthy animal. Is one of the catchphrases. And then, there's another one where like, there's a mobster scene and it starts calling people a filthy animal. You're a filthy animal. Sort of thing.
Yeah, that was the video they played in Home Alone where he's like, you got to the count of 10.
Yeah, no good, scum sucker.
Yeah. You know what's funny is that I looked it up. That's they made that clip for that movie, because I thought for a long time, I thought that was an actual movie that they were like playing in the movie, but they actually made that for Home Alone. It's pretty funny. Forget what it's called.
Well, that's where the whole Filthy Exile thing came from. And I just really liked it. It was unique, and my dad and I would always joke about it. It's been in every single birthday and Christmas card to everyone in my family ever since.
That's funny.
And then I went, we'll just make it part of the channel. But
that's cool.
Yeah, and then we get to now, Path of Exile 2. Actually, Path of Exile 2 is one of the things that I look forward to the most over all the years. So obviously I've been to every EXILECON, and I still remember playing Path of Exile 2 when it was in its like really, really early state. And so like they originally, when they showcased it, they had the Marauder, and that's where actually, if you have a look at anyone who's got the EXILECON 1, like they have a unique MTX that you get from every EXILECON.
Okay.
And the last one was like the hideout, the EXILECON hideout. The one before that, which was now, 8 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, which is wild to think. It'd be about 7 years ago now, that one was a Devourer portal. And if you have a look at the first boss in Grelwood, that's the portal that they gave out at EXILECON, because that's what they showcased.
Okay.
The original, like the way that POE2 originally looked was actually vastly different, but it sort of played like POE1, because at the time that was the direction they were taking with it. And it's hard to explain. Like, it felt really good, just off the ranks. And obviously things changed with the design that they went with in the very end. I'm hoping, like, what I'm starting to see with the changes in this patch, I guess, is like they're moving back in the direction of the very first like showcases of Path of Exile 2, when they were doing it as an amalgam between PoE 1 and 2. But yeah, the Devourer they originally showed was like crawling through the walls and all sorts of stuff like that in the tunnels and things. And it's disappointing to see that that stuff didn't make it in, but I guess there's reasons mechanically why it didn't make it in. But definitely that's where the Devourer Portal MTX comes from, which is the Devourer in POE2. But yeah, those were some of the, I guess, the history of the channel and all the stuff. There's, yeah, everyone has their lore.
What were the key differences that you saw between the way it was showcased back then and the way that it's showcased now? Like what is it that makes such a difference between those two things?
So there's a few trailers that still exist from the original like Act 1 area, and then Act 2 as well. So the combat was far more fluid and faster paced. So it was sort of like similar to the PoE 1 combat style. And that's where like there was like if you have a look at the original Act 2, the Vistari Desert trailers, right, and the gameplay trailer that went with it, they did like a showcase of like, I assume what the Amazon, from what was the original version of the Amazon. And like the way that they pitched it was like this really high octane combat where like you would have like pieces of the ceiling break away and it would show light and the light would damage enemies and stuff like that.
Oh wow.
So the environment, yeah, and this was like in understanding why like some of the PoE 1 players were upset with what came out originally was because what was originally pitched was just so vastly different to what we actually got in the 0.1 EA.
Right.
And so the problem that a lot of the PoE 1 players had was like, this was what they supported for like half a decade, right? And then what came out was so egregiously different. And even like when we went to the EXILECON, was it 2 years or 2 or 3 years ago now? I can't remember. Time's passing by quicker every day. But
right.
Even when we went and played the showcase there and stuff like that, it at the time, like I remember I was with my mate Yancey, and we were like, this is like totally different again, because we went to the original EXILECON together as well. And we're like, this is like totally different to how the game was sort of pitched, because it was like the first time we were seeing the current iteration of the game. And we sort of didn't believe that it was like as intense as what it sort of was. And the 0.1 that came out was, I guess, even harsher again. So like the way that they were pitching it at the showcases was like, bosses are going to be really difficult and stuff like that. And there's elements of that were really cool, like definitely the boss design and stuff like that. But like then what we got was like getting mobbed and destroyed every 5 seconds. There is one thing though from that EXILECON that I really hope to see eventually. And if you have a look at the original like run through of the weapons and the armor and gear and uniques and stuff like that, there was a showcase of one particular item that I was excited, and I haven't seen it yet. And it was a combat spoon. They were going to add a unique item into the game that was a spoon or a fork or something like that. And I'm yet to see it. I hope it does make its way into the game, but they were like joking that, they legit had designed this unique item. God only knows what it, where it's at right now in development. Maybe it's in development hell or something like that. But yeah, there's definitely a PoE2 unique spoon.
I was trying to look for it. I don't think it's not coming up on images, but I don't know. Let's see. You said it was at EXILECON, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was at EXILECON. It's there was a segment in EXILECON where they went through weapon design.
Yeah.
Yeah, here it is. It was a unique item called the Last Bite. It was shown during EXILECON in 2023. It was the unique item is a dagger that grants the player culling strike, a mechanic that instantly kills enemies when they're held. So it was something that maybe didn't make it into the final game. But it would have been so cool if we got a combat spoon.
Yeah, that would have been
I
fun.
will play any build that has a combat spoon. And then they have like a pan lid for a shield or something like that would be
Really?
awesome. But
That's funny.
yeah, but yeah, no. So that's what I remember from ExileCon. I was like, man, that looks so cool. Um, but yeah, no, that's I guess that's the big differences we saw was just like the original combat style was different. Obviously, they had
Right.
the flasking system was in the game still.
Yeah.
Arguably, I think like trinkets have a long way to go, and like they've even said they're not happy with the trinket system. I think they have a long way to go before they're like a credible source of, anything in the game. There's just like a weird feel about how trinkets work. And like I understand why they put them in was to accommodate console players for a predominant amount of that to automate the function that used to be with Flask. Because Flask were like you would play piano Flask, everybody
Right.
would either just get Mage Blood and have 100% Flask uptime or just automate them anyway. So no one was really. There's a whole thing about flasking. I think it was actually Calandra where they changed it, or it was around Calandra. So originally, Chris Wilson was like, they didn't want to see people just arbitrarily clicking the flask button. They really got the bee in their bonnet about that. And so they wanted people to like click flask when they needed it, which is where this whole like design philosophy comes from now around health and mana flasks.
Okay.
They don't want you to click it unless they want you to use it, which is really weird as to how trinkets work because like you don't really have any control over the trinket. It's just automatic. But what basically happened was everybody would just, they added inscribing orbs or no, not inscribing orbs, it's whatever they're called, the purple orbs for flasks in POE1. So like after they realized that was totally pointless because the whole idea with Calandra League was the reason why people got upset with Calandra League was a thing called Arch Nemesis, which was the league mechanic, which is very similar to the boss or the pack mechanics that we see in Path of Exile 2. Because again, like what they did for a large amount of leagues is they would test a lot of the stuff that they were developing for Path of Exile 2 and Path of Exile 1, which at the time peeved off a lot of the POE1 players because they copped the brunt of the testing and then, those things, obviously, whether they made it or didn't make it, we got what we got in POE1. And that's also where like the modifiers come from, like I was just saying, the modifiers come from on enemies and stuff like that. Archnem was not a very well received thing, and they basically reverted Archnem like 3 or 4 leagues later because it just wasn't very good. But the idea that they wanted to work with was slow the whole pace of the game down and then make it more, this is where the whole. So when people talk about the vision, this is when the vision conversation really started. And the word meaningful combat, this is where it came from. So when everybody talks about this is like point 2 is like Calandra League, it was exactly the same conversation, probably exactly the same groups of people. Everybody was having exactly the like, and this is why GGG probably freaked out. So I think in that league, they lost like 50% or something. It was a huge amount of player base that just left the game. And they did not have the same player base that they have for Path of Exile 2 now. So Path of Exile 2 to scale was still quite large. They ended up reverting a lot of stuff like Archnem because I think their revenue went down significantly as a result of that.
Right.
Like people walked away after like 2 to 4 weeks. They were done. Like they were just like, no, F this game. Like, and so they had to like issue a heap of apologies, and like Chris then did like a circuit to try and get people back on side. And they did. The next patch they came out with was actually really good. And that pulled a lot of players back in, but some players just walked away permanently because they basically felt like they were punched in the face.
Right.
And I would assume that was the feel with point 2 for a lot of people. And for those coming from POE1, that's where people got quite volatile because it's like, we've already been through this. Like, how many times do we need to go through this until the devs realize da-da-da-da? But given like another thing to consider with POE2 is that a lot of the devs that existed in Calandra are no longer with GGG. There's probably a cluster of them that are there now.
Right.
But like Rory, not Rory, or Rory Reckham was around then. But Mark was around back then, and obviously Jonathan and stuff like that. But there's probably heaps of devs that are there now that weren't aware of the history around all of that sort of stuff. But Yeah, so it's an interesting tale of like, you know, them repeating the same mistakes, and then now we get to point three where we get like this huge patch that totally overhauls the game and fixes a lot of stuff and stuff like that. So almost like repeating the same history all over again. But there's a whole like background to why POE1 players also, you know, get upset as to when people turn around and say, well, POE2 is not for you. Because like, you know, it's not a game that's made for you sort of thing. And this was like new POE2 players saying to old POE1 players. And the frustration that POE1 players, I can understand both sides of the argument, but the frustration that POE1 players experience with that is like for a very long time, all the testing was conducted on the POE1 players. And then the POE1 players also paid for all of the expansions and content that inevitably went back into the development of POE2.
Right.
So then, like, to then get into the game, it's totally different, and not what you expected or was sold when you invested into it, and then have a new player base that actually didn't put the resources into it and committed to it over the years to then get told to go away back to your little hole and stay where you were. Obviously, that was going to piss people off. Right. And so that's why obviously POE1 players got peeved about that. But that, like, I think now where we're at in the moving forwards beyond all of that crap, right, is I think like there is a market that will stay in POE1 in isolation. There'll be a market in POE2 that will stay in isolation. But I think we're moving away from that segmentation of the two player bases, and it's more combined now. And I think that's where it needs to go. Like, you know, you play Path of Exile 1 for a few months, and then you get a new league for POE2, and then LE comes out somewhere in between that and all that sort of stuff. But right. I think that's the positive moving forwards. There's always going to be a teething period at the start of all of this as the G2G figured things out and the player base sort of corrects and ebbs and flows with the change in the game and how it sort of gets perceived by the market. But I think now we're starting to see a lot more crossover between the two player bases. I've seen comments where people disagree with that, heavily, and they go, no, POE2 is its own player base and all this sort of stuff like that. But there's bleed between the two. So there's people going from POE2 to POE1 because they want to try it, which is bringing POE1 back up, and then POE1 going to POE2. I don't think at any point, like based on player numbers, that POE1's going to die anytime soon. And I think that was proved in the last league, nearly got to like 210,000 people or something like that.
Yeah, it was a banger, man. They got a lot of people back.
Yeah, it was a huge league and it was a really good league. And then obviously I've seen comments where people are like, oh, that pales in comparison to POE2, but POE2 is a new game. Whereas POE1 is 13-year-old game now, something like that. So you got to, give it credit where credit's due. I don't know of many games that sort of like WoW and a few others like RuneScape that have existed for the tenure of greater than 10 years. But it's an interesting conversation topic talking about all these sorts of things because there's just a lot of opinions within the community around how things are operating and what people feel. And
it'll be interesting to see how they finally strike that balance, because there is a balance to strike. We were talking about that a little bit before we got on. There is a balance there, and it'll be interesting to see what that looks like once they strike it, because I do think it's possible to please both groups.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's where the direction needs to go.
So I wanted to ask you, because you make a lot of builds. So mainly I've been focusing on POE1 on the podcast, just because, that's been the flavor of the year. But now that we're into Path of Exile 2 coming out, I wanted to kind of mainly focus on that. We can touch on POE1 a little bit. But as far as like offensively on your builds, like what would you say is your philosophy as far as like build creation? Like, what does a build need to have, or how do you get attracted to a build first? Like, what is it? Are you seeing like is there like a skill gem? Is there like a specific interaction between a unique and a skill? Is it, what are you looking for when you're deciding what build you want to put together?
So the rule of cool, like I'm a Warhammer fan and I operate on the rule of cool. I see. I don't necessarily care too much about like pure endgame optimization function, because if you invest enough time and effort, like the old adage is, if you throw enough divines at a build, eventually it's going to be able to do what you want. Like maybe not absolutely perfectly, POE2 is so the interesting thing about builds of POE2 is when I first picked up POE2, I had a mindset that I was playing with a game that was basically the same setup as POE1, right? And then what I did in POE1 was POE2 was totally hit a wall because I took to it with that mindset. It wasn't until I looked at like a few different like heavy defensive shield builds and stuff like that. And like then obviously Poe Ninja came out and stuff like that too, which makes that a hell of a lot easier to benchmark. Where I started to sort of understand more about how to get things working. One of the big problems that I guess I ran into with the 0.2 patch, and like arguably, like, you know, some people really love 0.1. I didn't like 0.1, and I sort of just walked away from the game after it came out. I wasn't. There's many reasons why I wasn't making builds in 0.1. Number one, I just didn't know enough about the game, and one of the things that I like to do in all of my videos is be able to thoroughly understand and explain everything so that if somebody plays that build who has never played the game before, there's enough explanation there to be able to help them get to the same numbers. I want them to be able to replicate what I can do,
right?
And be able to articulate that. And there's a history, but there have been channels on YouTube for a very long time that have put out bait builds where they would mislead. And it's actually one of the reasons why I started doing builds was because I followed some guides where it was impossible to get there, right? So that's one of the things I look for, is when I approach a build, can I actually articulate the build properly so that somebody can understand how I've done it and that I can explain it to them if they have an issue or they ask a question. They might DM me on Discord or be in chat in stream or something like that. So that's one of the elements. I like to keep builds simple. I generally tend to steer away from like overtly complicated mechanics, partly because I'm a little bit of a dummy sometimes and trying to figure those things out. No, I don't know everything. I also don't like glass cannons. So obviously being a Delve player for a very long time, but even in everything, you know, all video games, I always like the idea of being able to just like face tank stuff because I think it's amusing and fun and challenge how I play to be able to do that. So that's one of the things I look for, which is why I really like playing Smithik Atava, because you can basically build up to a level where you can take some big hits and still walk away from it.
Right.
And the reason why I like that is it rewards you for putting points into defense and dropping defense, but it also makes for a build that works for people who are still learning the game or struggling to understand how builds work. It's more forgiving. So when you're doing a build guide for somebody who it doesn't really understand how the game works or boss mechanics and they're trying to do it for the first time, if they've got a build that's tankier, then they can make mistakes and learn as they make those mistakes instead of just getting automatically penalized. So there's advantages to playing tank builds as well. And that's one of the things I like about it. As a content creator, I like to target towards people who work full-time or might have families and they don't have like insane amounts of time. So when they've got the opportunity, they can not just get bodied every 5 seconds.
Right.
I do not like metas at all. And all the build curations I put out, there's a few like base build. There are foundational builds, I call them. Invokers are usually like a really easy pick if you're playing Path of Exile 2 right now, like lightning or cold invokers. Take your pick. They're probably going to work every single league because you can't nerf that build enough to make it not good. There's probably other builds out there that exist like that. Dead Eyes, Lightning Arrow. I always call Lightning Arrow players degenerates after I ran into one at EXILECON and like he goes, I just league start Lightning Arrow. The only build that matters to me is Lightning Arrow. I'm like, there's something wrong with you, bro. Like those builds, I call those like foundation builds. And like you could look at 1,000 different channels on YouTube and probably find 1,000 different variations of exactly the same build. I think that's like as a player really boring because like as a build creator and a player and somebody who like features other people's builds these days and can talk through them and, you know, directs people to play different things. I just don't like the idea of everybody playing like Lightning Spear. I looked at Lightning Spear. I thought it was really cool at the very start for 0.2 and going to play it. And then I realized like every man and his dog was playing that build. I was like, why would I want to play that build? If everybody else is playing that build, what fun am I going to get from that? So I ended up playing the Explosive Spear, and I had a lot of fun, got all the way through endgame with Explosive Spear. Be it slower, worked fine. And part of the challenge was then problem solving and going, how do I push this build beyond to get it to do T15, T16 content and Pinnacle content? And so that's what I look for with builds. So like simplistically, rule of cool, off metas, and also sometimes, like a lot of the times I end up failing with a lot of builds and people don't necessarily see that 100% of the time. I've done videos in the past to go post-mortem, this is why my build failed, which a lot of people tend to steer away because everybody just wants to put out, oh, this is the best build ever. Also something I never really put ever in videos is this is the best build. I don't think any build is best. I think the build that you think is fun is the best build.
Right.
I don't think objectively there is a best build. Though some people will argue with that. I think, Lightning Arrow for me, boring as hell. Why the hell would I play it if I'm not going to get any enjoyment out of it? Tier lists for ascendancies or like classes as well. I'm not a fan of tier lists because like I could take a Witch Hunter right now and probably get to the same level as a Deadeye to a capacity, but it would do different functions. And so different mechanics will be easier to play with that setup versus, like, for example, the Weapon Master weapon switch with 100 weapon points is a wild ascendancy point that you can't do on anything else. So like some people would view that as being a better ascendancy than the Deadeye, because the Deadeye for them is Tailwind may not be as good of a thing as being able to do 100% weapon switch almost. So I tend to steer away from that stuff. And what I usually find when I do quite a bit of research before I go and put out the like build lists and stuff like that, is there's a lot of really good builds that, like, obviously you get your big creators that get like a lot of views and everybody clicks on those videos because of that, and that's how YouTube works, that's the algorithm. But there's actually a lot of really good smaller build creators with POE2 coming out with some really innovative stuff, like the one I saw from Silly Lily, or Lily is Silly, sorry, with like mana stacking thorns, right? Just totally different off the cuff. And then you get people in comments, you read through comments and videos and they're like, oh yeah, I tried something like this and it actually worked. And then you're like, oh, this is really cool. There's a few others, like, there's one that I put as a special mention on video I just uploaded, which is like Lightning Spear Witch Hunter, which is just like, it's Lightning Spear, and obviously it's been nerfed since, but the build will still be really good. But it's on a Witch Hunter, which has a totally different mechanic about how you play Lightning Spear then, and obviously with mana reductions and whatnot, it now makes it a lot more sustainable. But those are all the things that I look for in builds. A lot of the time I'm just looking for really interesting mechanics and unique things. The other thing I'd say is, like, if you just play the same build every single league, then you'll learn nothing. And so you got to play different things to branch out, because with every different build you either fail or succeed at, you learn a new mechanic with it, right?
Right.
And then that's how you culminate that knowledge. It becomes game knowledge, and this is where people are like, oh, I don't know anything about the game or whatnot, because, and I'd always say to people, like, there are two ways to go. Like, you can take the path of following a build guide. You can use that guide as a guide to build something else, which gives you an idea of where to build, and then you problem solve from there. Or you can just wing it. Either way is there's no incorrect answer as to how to approach it. It just depends on if you're okay with failing. You'll at least learn one thing. And the most important thing when you do fail with a build is understanding why the build didn't work. Because the next build that you approach, well, okay, you've learnt your lessons, so then you build on that, and then you deal with that problem in a different way or whatnot. So those are all the things I look for when I'm looking either for builds to feature or builds that I'm making.
Okay. So if you were, let's start like offensively, just in Path of Exile 2. Well, I don't know if you saw, first I wanted to mention this. Maxroll just did their blast cast. I think they had Crouching Tuna, Zizarin, Karn, and I forget who else is on there, but there's some leaks coming out of China. I don't know if you saw this, but on the Witch Hunter Ascendancy, they buffed the explosion is now 15%, I think. And then on top of that, there's another node behind it that does marks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think I saw something about that. That's pretty OP, to be honest.
Yeah,
with
Witch
you,
Hunter is going to be absolutely busted, is what it sounds like.
it's going to be fantastic. That means like if you're playing things like Lightning Spear, then you just do like full screen pack clear and explode stuff and chain explode stuff, which is pretty cool.
Right. Or you could do like with the 100 passive points. I mean, you can get all the way across the entire tree.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Exactly.
So you can do whatever you want. Like you can make you could do one completely defensive, one completely offensive. You can do one for pack clearing. You could do one for mapping. It seems like Witch Hunter might be the way to go.
It's lucrative because, yeah, that weapon switch being instant too means like you can go straight from like fighting a pack to straight into fighting a map boss or something like that. I really like that idea. Like stuff that I was trying on Witch Hunter originally was like max dodge or phase acrobatics and like twin maces. And with all the changes to weapons and maces, like you could probably do something like that really successfully now. And part of that is like there's more AoE in the game, but also on top of that, like with that node, that gives you that 15% chance to like, you know, basically explode packs. That's pretty powerful, right?
Yeah.
Bleed builds, you know, if you could get dot onto enemies. But the big one there would be like what was it, the grenade totems that are being added in?
Yeah, the mortar cannon.
Yeah, mortar cannon, yep. That could be really, really crazy, and you got access to totem nodes down there and everything now. So that could
I think they're adding. I think they're adding a lot more totem stuff to the tree. That's what it looks like.
Yep.
Yeah. So they're gonna.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I'm gonna league start as totems. I was thinking of doing totem, a hybrid totem minion build. Not with the weapon swap, obviously, because that wouldn't work. But I want to do. I want to have the minions breaking armor with what's the gem that uses poison to break armor?
I can't remember what it is, but I know the one.
Erosion or something like that. I can't remember what it's called. I can pull it up. But anyway, I want to use that to break armor, and then have the that new one that they changed. I think it's was it high velocity rounds?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, because you can use that with the because it's got a projectile modifier, and you can use that with it. If you're using, I think it's is it corrosion? Corrosion. That's what it's called. Yeah, and then you can use Plague Burst, I think. And there was Kaltoric was playing with it last league, and then you can chain break armor. I don't know if they changed that mechanic, if that was a bug, but yeah, you're able to basically light up whole screens and just continually use armor explode or something like that with it too.
You're talking about Plague Bearer or Plague?
No, there's like a Plague Burst or like a Poison Burst. It was like a tier 1 support gem. Can't quite remember what it was, but okay. Kaltoric did something with it last league, and you could basically just light up whole screens, and it would just keep traveling from enemy to enemy, and then it would just burst break the armor, and then go to the next enemy, and just continue to chain explode.
It's called Bursting Plague.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was something with that you could abuse that mechanic somehow, and then just light up. I don't think it's very good for bosses, but for map clear, absolutely insane. Yeah,
well then also because of the debuff that they're putting on, I think it's on high velocity rounds, if I'm not mistaken. So the high velocity round change no longer consumes fully broken armor, but instead hitting a fully broken armor enemy will apply a debuff, and that's going to cause your attacks against the enemy to deal additional physical damage. So they're going to take increased damage. That might be really, really overpowered for bossing. That's what I was thinking, at least. But
I think like everything's going to be we're just going to see like a totally different, like the big advantage here too is like you could have that on multiple skill setups, and just like you could either do like a one shot setup, or try and like do something big and explodey or whatever, and then have all the same sort of support gems. For me, like armor explode is where my headspace is at the moment. Like the ability to have like I was thinking like Wind Dancer, and then there was another support gem for War Cries as well that they added last league that used armor break. But looking at like stuff like that where you could basically just like chain run armor break on Wind Dancer, and then have all your skills with armor explode. Then have all your skills with like armor explode, and then just like keep proccing as much armor explode as you possibly can, armor break and armor explode. I think that's a lot of fun, to be honest with you. I just like blowing. And like that, they didn't touch Trample Toes. Again, Trample Toes still has this 30% overkill damage. There's nothing in the patch notes about Trample Toes, unless they're going to phantom nerf that and not tell us about it.
Can you explain the mechanic behind this?
So basically, overkill damage is like it's like increased excessive damage over the top of the enemy. So there's a cap to how much damage you do to an enemy, and if you do more damage than what the enemy's health is, you have like an overkill element of damage, and the Trample Toes expands that damage. And then if you run something like Herald of Ash, it then continues to expand that damage with Herald of Ash. So you end up with like full-blown pack explode. And that's why like I think Lex had like his magma barrier build that used it, and there's a whole heap of, I was using it all last league. Basically it's like huge AoE. And so like if you're doing big armor break explodes, then you've got Herald of Ash plus overkill damage. You then like you explode the first enemy, and then it gives you a 30% damage buff, but with the damage that goes over the top of that first enemy's HP, and then it hits the next enemy, breaks that armor, and explodes that.
Oh wow! Okay, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, so they didn't. The disadvantage of Trample Toes is its movement speed's pretty low. I think it's like 10%.
That's changed now. Especially with the exceptional bases. Now I think you can have how many sockets can you put in boots for those movement speed runes?
Be 2 to 3. Well, if it's exceptional, you get 3 because you'd be able to corrupt it to 3. So then you could just chuck on like, was it 8% movement speed per rune?
I think so.
Yeah, so yeah, you don't even need to worry about that anymore.
Yeah, not only that, but now you have the Darkness Enthroned too, and you can get that with an extra 2. So you could do, let's see, what is the movement speed? Oh, I'm sorry. It's, so the Feral's rune is 5% increased movement speed, but technically 15. You can get an extra 25% if you really wanted to optimize movement speed with the Darkness Enthroned.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there'll probably be some stuff on the tree that you can pull from too. Action speed increases.
Yeah.
So Trample Toes, like usual, is going to be ridiculously good. I pretty much run it on every build because I just like the one tap builds. So that like the Wind Blast Mythic Katava is basically going to be like abusing Trample Toes, abusing Armor Break and Armor Explode, and now like what was it? Staggering Palm basically has like insane amounts of stackable uptime now. Wind Blast has daze on hit, so you daze and heavy stun, then Armor Explode. Yeah, it's just going to be a pack clearing monster.
Just for people that don't understand, like, just as far as like, you know, if people have experience in the game, obviously we all have a limited amount of it, but for people that don't understand, is there a way you could break down how to scale damage just in like steps? Like, what are you looking for first? Like, are you just looking for, does it work the same way as POE1? Like, is there a way that you could give like a miniature tutorial on how to scale damage?
It depends on the type of damage and the base damage. So for POE2, there's a few different sources. If you look at like the most simple like skill setup, right? Let's talk about monks, right? So 2 elements change the way that damage scales. One is obviously gem level. And the way to check the damage scaling or the percentage damage scaling will be to go onto like POE2.db, and you can see different skills have a different exponent based on the gem level. Some are not equal to others, obviously, for obvious reasons. The bigger hitting skills like Hammer of the Gods have like into the 800%. Like, I think it was like level 30 was like 835% or some insane number like that, because that's obviously a skill you're not going to use like every single hit. You're going to get glory to be able to use it. So part of it is gem level scaling, which is why you see items with like, you know, +6, +7, whatever gem level, or if you get an early drop with like +2 or 3 gem level, that's going to give you a huge advantage damage wise. Definitely, it was one way that totems worked, but they've now been changed, and same with artillery, ballistas as well. The other way to scale damage, like just explicitly, is the damage number on your weapon itself. So like monk skills, for example, you'll find that gem level sometimes isn't necessarily the most important element to have on a weapon. Whereas if you have like a quarterstaff that has like 700 to 800 physical damage, that's going to scale your damage up further. Obviously, things like crit are a big factor as well. Previously, accuracy had an element of scaling, but accuracy no longer really matters for melee, which is good, but accuracy will count for like bows. So the way that accuracy works is, I think they changed some of the mechanics around it, but basically more accuracy means the more probability your hit's going to hit the enemy. So if you got 100% accuracy, it's going to narrow the distance of where your damage drop off is, and then you're 100% accuracy, you get 100% hit. Those are like the really most basic levels of scaling. Where you have skills that that scale with like elemental damage, for example, then obviously elemental damage scaling on weapons will work. So artillery ballista previously, right, the way that you scaled damage on artillery ballista, if you had like a lot of base fire damage or physical to fire conversion on it, or like fire infusion, for example, then you wouldn't actually scale physical damage on your crossbow. You would scale elemental damage, and that would increase your damage exponentially, which is a roll that you get on your crossbow. I think it's a prefix. But now they've changed totems, for example. The base damage isn't attached to the gem any longer. It's attached to the weapon. So
right.
Previously, like the base scaling, say it was like 400, right, at like level 20 on the gem, right, which is quite powerful. Arguably, if you've got a weapon that does like 600 or 700 flat base physical damage, then the skill is going to be stronger in the upper end, but weaker in the early game. And that's the difference with how totems scale right now. So if you start earlier, your weapon's going to be weaker, your damage is going to be lower. But as you'll get better weapons, then it's going to go much higher in the end game. So it's going to become more insane. So that one you could look at as a buff in the late game with a nerf to the early game, basically.
Yeah, I was looking at that. That's the reason why I wanted to start with artillery ballistas. I just wasn't sure on what ascendancy to go with. I was thinking tactician, but that's an insane buff, because I was looking at it. The artillery ballista already does fine as it is. Yeah. You just scale up the levels, but it could get nowhere near what a crossbow could get to for flat damage.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I mean. So like technically it's a nerf but a buff at the same time. And GGG they want to deter you from abusing it early on, because like a lot of people were playing artillery ballista. But like they're not penalizing you when you invest into it, and that's the way skills should sort of work. So like the more that you put into it over time, the better the skill's going to get, because you're investing into the build. And that also gives you end game life. Like you shouldn't cap out at level 90 and be able to just slap on all the gear you need or whatever, unless you've actually put the time in to build it out. And then you level it up over time and progress it, and then it continually exponentially grows. But that's actually part of the problem with like the 1 and 2 shot stuff. Like some skills were just so exceptionally scaled up in their base damage rates that they, like artillery ballista didn't even require you to have a hefty weapon. So in that case, like you're gonna have to try and roll flat fizz damage on the weapon to keep that up high to scale the gem damage up. But you're also going to need elemental damage damage to proc the additional fire damage or whatever other elemental damage type. So it's an extra couple mods that you need on the weapon that makes the weapon more expensive or more difficult to craft. But ultimately, if you invest into it, you're going to end up with a result that's probably going to be way better than what it was in 0.2.
Right. Can you kind of explain how damage conversion works, just for people who might not understand it?
It's just percentage of whatever the flat damage is. So say you got a weapon that does 700 DPS, use that as an example. You've got a gem that converts that 700 DPS by 60%, right, to elemental damage. And then my understanding is rudimentary of it. And then basically you've then got, for example, your elemental damage scaling. So that's going to then increase that 60% conversion out and extrapolate the damage. The other element of that is where you've got enemy resistances. So you want to be able to drop elemental resistances as low as possible. They're adding a new support gem that inverts elemental resistances as well.
Yeah, that thing looks busted. bust.
Well, where that's really strong is like Doriani's prototype builds, for example, where you can get negative lightning resistance and stack negative lightning resistance on yourself. Potentially there's some interactions there where you could invert elemental resistance on enemies to be able to make that more effective. But ultimately, like if you got an enemy with 40% fire resist for whatever reason it might be, or if you can cast your own auras on the enemy, and I think you can in Path of Exile too, then if you can cast your own aura on the enemy, and I think there is something that allows you to do that, then basically if you then buff the enemy's elemental resistance up and then your skill has an inversion gem on it, it means if you're giving the enemy 40 to 60% resistance or whatever it might be, but then your skill has an inverter on it, then you're then turning their resistances, you're giving them resistance, then turning them negative, and then you obviously then scale your own damage and then you'll wipe enemies out much quicker. You could do it in Path of Exile 1. I think you can do it in POE2, but I can't remember how you do it. Obviously, that's a benefit of like all the stuff to do with like flammability, which has now been just elemental weakness.
Right.
So that is going to increase your damage because obviously you're scaling up your elemental damage, but then you're scaling down the enemy's resistance to that elemental damage, which is going to continually increase your damage.
Right.
It's more or less like that's the foundation of how damage conversion works. There's other stuff that plays. I've also, my understanding is that you can't like reconvert damage. And like if you think of like 100% as your damage cap, then, you know, if you're converting some of your damage to chaos, lightning, and fire, whatever it might be, it's like they all apportion out to about 100% damage overall because you can only have 100%. That's your total ceiling. But yeah, so if you have like original sin, then some builds will work really well with original sin, which is the chaos ring. Others you could slap it on and it'll actually do worse. That might be because, you know, the enemy may not have negative chaos resistance or something like that. Mm-hmm. So there's a number of different things that that can sort of dictate how damage scales like that. But that's that's my fundamental understanding. Like obviously there's more math that goes behind that.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah, and yeah. Same applies with your defenses too. Like there's obviously the math around like how armor works, which is the question now. The armor that applies to like elemental damage taken is calculated before resistances, whereas if it was calculated after resistances in the algorithm, then it would be stronger. And that's where people don't really like. You can look at the math all day long, but until you actually play the build and get a feel for how strong something might be, mm-hmm. And how easy it is to now scale armor and stuff like that, there's a lot of questions and unknowns about some of the changes that have been added to the game.
That's what that's what a lot of people are saying, that modifier is going to be absolutely useless. That's what they're saying. But I don't know. Dreamcore came out with a video saying that it has some potential, I guess. But it's just, I think that as you go up, I think that the percentage, it just keeps going down of the amount it's going to mitigate. Like as you go up with the hit that you're taking, the percentage that it's going to mitigate is going to go way down.
I think part of it is because elemental damage has a much higher scalable top end hit than what like physical damage will have.
Right.
But the problem with a lot of builds right now is like you look at like evasion builds, and it's really interesting to say like evasion's the weakest of the damage mitigators, right, in the content reveal, because that is very untrue. Evasion is like one of the better mitigators than armor. Armor is I think they're like, I don't know where their position is on how they think armor looks, but it's not the way the community doesn't agree with it. But yeah, look, I think like if you have the same capacity to be able to grow armor as easily as evasion, because evasion seems to be much easier to get to like 20 or 30,000 than it is to get 20 or 30,000 armor. Right. And I think that's the big difference. The other big problem is like life. So like with armor, you still have to have a reasonable life pool, and the current life pool is like on average 2.8 to 3.2 thousand. If you have a look at like Path of Exile 1, the average was 5,000. So you basically, you want to get past 5,000 and you're scaling up. 5,000 was like a safety zone. And so maybe they've increased the capacity on the skill tree to be able to get life into builds as well, because as it is, there's only a few nodes that do that. There are other things too, like, you know, you look at stuff like life recoup over time, or like Defiance of Destiny, which basically, you know, mitigates a portion of the damage inbound coming to your build so that you recover that life straight away as opposed to taking the full damage. Obviously, the big thing here is block, and then Giant's Blood's been nerfed because you're not going to get the you're going to lose HP because it's going to take away your strength scaling. So that's where people are upset about that right now.
Right.
But that being all those things being said, right? So I played an Incendiary shot Smith at Katava last league that didn't use a shield, right? And I was able to tank hits perfectly fine. Obviously, that's with overcapped fire reses and stuff like that, and conversion to fire reses from physical. But like, you know, I think like if that mechanic is sort of being added in and it's as effective as they're sort of pitching it, then it might actually be okay. Because my build was perfectly okay with tanking all sorts of stuff into like tanking Zesh hits and stuff like that without that stuff, be it like a bit risky and you want to kill the enemies before they really get on you. But yeah. At the end of the day, like we won't really know until we play the league. And that's the only real way to know where we're going to go with that. So
do you think that, do you think we're going to get the skill tree before the patch drops?
If we're going to get it, it's got to be today. Like in the next like 10 to 15 hours. I don't think we're going to get it. The thing that they did say in the I think there was like a X post or something like that. Basically they said that they couldn't provide it until the website was patched or something like that. And usually they don't roll out the actual patch deployment on the website until the like right before the start of the league, on the actual like release date. And it's not been uncommon in the past for like Path of Exile 1, for example, where we haven't had the tree provided until like way after, and like the was it local identity or whatever it is, doesn't get to update the POB until like maybe 2 or 3 or 4 days into the league. So that has happened more than once over the history of POE1. So with all the changes, I wouldn't be surprised if they're just sort of sitting on it and they're not going to release it before the league, because like we're 24 hours before. I don't think their priority is to release the tree for people to build plan. I think their priority right now is to make sure server stability is okay with all the changes they've made.
Yeah, not only that, they're doing the free weekend too. I think that's going to be a I think that's going to pull a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's where, like, arguably that's where the priority. Sure, I don't think it's a bad thing either. Like some people want to like full blown build plan and stuff, but I think like I'd rather have a good league start where you're not getting constantly booted from the servers,
right?
As opposed to getting the build tree early. And if you got an idea of where you're building in the direction, like they've added nodes and changed a few nodes in there. I assume they haven't like vastly ripped the nodes out and put them on the other side of the tree or anything like that. They haven't said anything like that. So it's just going to be more options and choices, not like totally re-engineering. Like in POE1, they moved it where elemental equilibrium was, right? They put it on the opposite side of the tree. That's like a build defining change in your POB, but in this case they're just adding stuff to the Atlas tree or the pathing tree. So I don't think it's a huge issue.
I was looking at the side by side, and it looks like the mercenary starting point and then the ranger starting point are going to be ranger / huntress. They're going to be added a lot more right there, and then as it goes up to the top middle of the tree, it looks like it kind of falls off, and then as it goes over to the left side, obviously nothing's being added there because we don't have the new class yet. But I kind of have an idea where I'm gonna, because obviously I'm gonna play totems, so I'm just gonna be going straight down from the mercenary, so it's not gonna be too big of a deal. I kind of wanted to have I kind of wanted to plan it out just because I don't want to spend a lot of time but I mean it's not that big of a deal.
You could use the existing tree and sort of map out where you hit your totem nodes as quick as possible.
Right.
But I think they're reducing some of the attribute point nodes on the outside of the tree as well, where we usually travel around the tree. So that means less points burn up in trying to get to the next like area in the tree, which is a big advantage that's a huge change from a tree standpoint. So you're not wasting as many points on trying to scale attributes overall, which is a big problem with the 0.2 and 0.1 patch.
Right.
It's scarcity. yeah.
What are you can you go over your build with real quick? What did you say you're going to play again for the league start?
Yeah. So I've got I started playing around with Armor Break and Wind Blast. So Quarterstaff on the Warrior. And the reason why was like I sort of just wanted to play something different. And then and so I managed to get the DPS as it stands with Wind Blast up to about 120,000 DPS, which is pretty like on average for a standard like non-bossing hit's pretty high, especially like when it's like fire conversion and stuff like that. And I accounted for like attributes and things because I got to balance dexterity and intelligence essentially, and then run like a dex chest and then use like iron reflexes to convert that into armor. But I wanted to scale up like huge AoE, and the warrior like pathing around that part of the tree is like crushing judgment and all that sort of stuff. So it gets a lot of AoE, and quarterstaff scale off of two-hand damage and attack damage as well. So you don't necessarily need to have like quarterstaff damage nodes to scale up the damage. And obviously you get access to a lot of rage and also like, you know, fire in the warrior side of the tree. So I just wanted to do something different. Also like maces, I don't know how they're going to feel like with the 0.3 league. So maces are really like lackluster to play early on. They're just like not that good. So quarterstaffs, I did my level test and it just sort of breezed through the whole like early game without any issues whatsoever. And then I sort of thought about, okay, well, how do you get, you know, armor explode? Because that was previously a tier 2 support gem. So I was like, well, we could just go Warbringer, take Anvil's weight, which gives you, you know, that early armor break equal to 10% damage. And then, you know, you're pretty much laughing. But yeah, I was sort of, yeah, going that direction. And obviously the other avenue I could take is Smithic Atava. And even though like the leather bindings got reduced to 3% life regeneration, that's still huge amounts of life regeneration early on. Like that's just, you know, easy mode for early on. And then, yeah, you take like Coal Stoker and then you just double your resistances, so you don't even have to worry about mucking around with resistances and just put all your points into offense. So yeah, I sort of played with it and I was like, it's really cool. Then obviously with the instant weapon switch, now you can just like chuck, like there's enough strength in this build because it's on the warrior, right? You can chuck pretty much any two-handed mace in and you can automatically switch to like Hammer of the Gods. So I think I got it up to, the setup got up to like 917,000 DPS on the Hammer of the Gods weapon switch without any downside. So like right. You can just instantly, you can build your glory up with your Wind Blast, hit the boss a few times, get your Hammer of the Gods, and then just like drop that on the bastard and wipe him out and run away laughing. So, and you can do that with like good health regeneration and armor and stuff like that. So yeah, I just like playing warrior, to be honest with you.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, it'd be that would fit your the type of archetype that you like to play. I mean,
yeah, just no deepest tower. That's the only disappointing thing. I was like, oh man, I can't use low life BS this time. But no, this was a good way to get around it.
Are there any other like unique interactions in this league starter at all, or is it pretty much just the armor break explosions?
It's pretty much just armor break explosion. Like it's simple AF at the end of the day. Part of it is you still like I still want to have a bit of a safe-ish league start, but right. Something that's a bit more unique. And the Vindicator here is like, I had a couple of people that went into the comments section. They were like, oh, they played something very similar.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a good chance like armor explosion is going to work. Pretty much anything you put armor explosion on and armor break is going to be a good compensator for damage because you can scale it up. The other thing too is like you could go Titan and then just totally abuse the hulking. Was it the hulking form nodes?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that actually gets me up to like 1.152 million DPS. To be honest with you, it's not a bad. To be honest with you, looking at it now, like that might actually be better running it on the Titan, to be honest with you. But does Wind Blast get up to, just having a quick look, yeah, 140,000 DPS with just Wind Blast, and then 1.152 mil with Hammer of the Gods. So it's not bad for a league starter.
Right.
But,
what were What are you most excited about to see coming to Path of Exile 2? What's the one thing that if you had a choice to add, what would you add?
Delve. Like, of course.
Right.
Who doesn't want to play Delve? Like, I thought that Abyss might end up being Delve, but it doesn't look like we're going to get that lucky. But yeah, no, they make a lot of comments about Sulfite in the content reveal, like the Goblin boss that they show at the end. So like he's just sitting there like chugging on Sulfite. I do know from some of the interviews that one of Jonathan's favorite mechanics in Path of Exile was Delve, and even down to like you have a look at the Atlas map, like the changes to biomes. The biome system comes from Delve out of POE1. So like I do right now, I'm pretty excited about the change to like having the wind biomes and all that sort of stuff with all the different bosses and like lootables and stuff that come from that. But yeah, once Delve's in the game, like I can't see myself like endgame map blasting unless I have to play it to get Sulfite to go back into Delve. And who the hell knows what that's going to look like. Like that could be totally nuts. But yeah, that's pretty much where my headspace is. I just want Delve.
The one thing I wanted to ask you, the one thing I wanted to ask you, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the one thing I wanted to ask you about the mapping system was how do you feel about the tower system, and where what do you want to see changed as far as like the end game mapping, or do you enjoy it the way it is?
So the problem I have with the entire way the end game's approached is they made it like homogenous for every build, right? So you think about like the thing that makes builds unique. It's their function, right? What they do best or what they do better than other builds, right? And the problem that I see with like, and I think this is the problem that they're running into with their current design philosophy, right? So you're saying that you like heist, right? So you would play a particular build that would more likely either excel at heist or have a better advantage in heist, right? That's the thing that makes builds like build defining is the mechanic that is specialized for. Like, for example, my favorite build style is tanky because you need to have a lot of survivability in Delve. Map blasters are focused on glass cannons that can one-tap entire packs or whatnot and blast through maps. Ritual players probably have their own thing. Delirium players, again, you want builds that have low levels of mobility but high levels of damage. So like Spark builds really effective at that and able to like reverb stuff off walls and ricochet things. All these elements make builds unique and also like separate players into their own little niche. Blight and POE1 is another example. So you would have people who play like Ravage Blight, so you would have different builds that excel at that. Minion builds in particular do really well at Blight because you just sit there and you farm it. I think this is one of the things that is a problem with the endgame currently in Path of Exile 2 is that, and they continually try to address this by changing the way that you attack the league content. Like they want you to have to play the league content to be able to get access to crafting elements and stuff. And I can empathize with that. Like I understand their approach with that. But in trying to make a build work with absolutely every mechanic equally, you take away the element of a build that makes it unique and fun for the player. Some players don't like playing Ritual. Some players don't like playing Delirium. Some players don't like playing Breach. Right. Shouldn't be pushed into the direction where you have to play everything generically. And the other problem with that too, from a game design standpoint, is it means they've had to dumb down those mechanics to a point where like you have to cram it into your Atlas map. The problem with the way that the endgame mapping system works too is because you're reliant on the tower system. If you don't get enough towers to sustain that, to be able to get access to that, or if you don't get enough of the whatever the tablets are called to be able to basically get what you want out of the accompanying maps, then you sort of limit the capacity to be able to access that content. And that's one of the things that like people say, like the POE1 mapping system is, be it a bit, not as like fluid as the POE2 mapping system, but it gives the player the control to play the content that they really want to focus on the most. So like I could just sit there and play Ritual all day long. Every single map is Ritual. Like that's what I want to farm. I should be able to farm that, right? My build is designed to do that. POE1 lets you do that. And it comes back to the whole concept of player agency at the end of the day. you're going to have a lot more fun playing the content that you want to play than being forced down a narrow tunnel, and basically you have to play whatever's right in front of you and just deal with it. And I think that's some of the problems that exist with the end game design right now, where it's like the idea is really cool, but it's just not. This is where players start to walk away. Like, whereas, like, you know, you'll have players that'll sit there, if they really love a mechanic, they'll just play that mechanic for like a week straight without, like, you know, seeing any other mechanics because they don't care about it. I think if they find a way to bring that back in, and maybe it might just be where the Atlas, you know, gives you a probability for use the tower system for something else, right? To proc up mods like percentage modifiers, magic find, whatever. Use the towers for that. If people want to do it, great. If they don't, they can just, like, you know, Alk and go almost, right? So you just Alk, go, hit map and go. But then have the probabilities of the league mechanics not based on the tower mods, but based on the Atlas tree as it was previously in POE1. I think that would sort of realign where things need to go. The other problem is just around, like, the fact that you don't get to select the maps that you want to run, right? They sort of force you to play the maps that they want you to force upon you based on RNG. People don't really like that. And the problem with it is, like, if you've got a farming strategy, this is what you want to do for hours on end. Like, in my case, I run Strand, T16 Strand in POE1 because it's my favorite map. It's a straight line. It's efficient. And I get the most enjoyment out of farming that because, you know, when you get to endgame and you're farming at that capacity, like, you're either farming for loot drops in POE2 or you're farming for currency. And so, you know, you either want to optimize it the way you want to play. At that point, you just want to scale your build up to be able to do the things you want to do. The problem with POE2 is it's too casual. And it takes away, like, when you get to, like, if you've played 100 hours into a character and you just want to optimize one strategy, you're probably at a point where you're beyond the casual gauze of just, like, standard gameplay, and you really want to have control over what you're doing. And right now you can't do that. And I think that's the difference between where POE2 is right now and where it needs to go to eventually cater for that more hardcore audience at that real endgame level. And I think once they figure out how they make that work, whether the current mapping system is even the right system is another question. Maybe it's not the right approach. And they said at the end of point 2, that Jonathan, you know, said he wasn't really happy with the endgame system as it was. The other thing too, like, thinking about it, is, like, they scratched that endgame system together so they could get that out on release so there would be an endgame. Otherwise it'd be pretty lackluster. So I wouldn't be surprised, and this happened many times in Path of Exile 1, I wouldn't be surprised if that endgame system as it is right now is totally different by the time we get to 1.0, and it looks nothing like that. Like, you know, they went through originally, for example, the mapping system in POE1 had, like, a trail system where you would have to follow Elder and Shaper around until you triggered the boss fight. Then they went to, like, watchstones, and I still call them watchstones. And they used to have, like, a point in between different areas, and that's how you used to trigger the Conquerors when the Conquerors expansion came out. And then you'd have to do, like, so many runs in that clustering to be able to get access to the Conqueror. And then they changed to the Voidstone system. Now we only have to do, like, 4 pinnacle boss fights to get access to the Voidstones. Part of that was just, like, the players got sick of having to level up all the watchstones over and over again, so because it was tedious and it took ages, but it did make the end game a very long end game. But yeah, I think, like, the same sort of thing will happen with POE2 in the end game, where it looks like how it is now, but it's probably not going to stay that way. I'm be pretty confident to say it's going to look nothing like that by the end of 1.0. It's going to look totally different. Probably going to...
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Sorry.
What were you going to say?
Oh, it's probably going to happen as they add more content into the game, which is what we're seeing, 20 new maps or whatever coming in now.
Right. Do you think that it would be fixed if the Waystones dropped as specific maps, and then they just added a way to block, like they have in POE1's Atlas? Like, you could block certain mechanics from rolling on the maps. If they added that into the Atlas passive and then just had the Waystones drop as specific maps like they do in POE1, do you think that would fix it?
I think the problem there is to do with the themology behind how that mapping system works. So, like, if you think about it, right, so if you just made it like arbitrarily the map that you want to roll, right, then it doesn't make sense as to how that map is actually laid out. So you'll have a sand area, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
they want to focus on this biome mod, and it's even in the Atlas tree, right? Atlas Passage tree.
Right.
So you have a sand area, but you run a jungle map in that sand area, or like a underground map in that sand area. It won't make sense with how the game's designed currently, which is why the POE1 system works so well, because it doesn't like thematically doesn't lock you into that position, and that's the problem with the POE2 system.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
It could be the way that the map is structured, maybe. So like, but then they would have to design like a tile set, redesign a tile set for the same map like 20 different times, and maybe you have like a modifier that says, you know, you have a straight line map or like a wide area map or something. But then you're getting like, you're moving away from like simplicity, and you're just making a very basic process really complicated.
Mm-hmm. Well, what if they just made multiple maps for multiple different biomes? So like wherever you were at on the Atlas passive, you just have to run one of those maps. Like you need to find like a desert biome to run in this area. And then if you have like a jungle one, then you have to, you know what I mean? Then you have to find a jungle map to run, but you get to pick which map you want to run. Maybe that would be like a compromise between the way they have it now and then the way that kind of would make it better.
Yeah, possibly. It's a hard one to answer. The problem with what they've designed really doesn't give you easy options, because it's reliant on how that design works.
Right.
Like it's the same reason why the ecosystem is so lucrative with Last Epoch, right? Because you don't have that. It don't, like if you had a system to change the echoes, right? You could just change the echo. Nobody's going to be like, oh, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It could be like you have a tower triggers a cataclysm and changes the overall environment on that area and gives you a recalibration of the maps. Like that could be another way that you do it. Like something happens or whatever and changes everything, and the world morphs. But then like you look at the theme of Ray class and it's like, how does that work? Because like you got set zones and this is what I mean. Like either you got to stick to your guns and leave it as it is, or you've got to come up with a way that fits in with the theme. Otherwise, it's not going to be congruent with what they're designing. So, yeah, I think on paper the idea sounds cool, but when they applied it, it doesn't work the way they intend. The other thing would be is to actually focus on the biome system even more, which is what I think they're starting to do, which is like different biomes affect different maps. So there's an incentive to take on different maps because you get a different modifier. I don't know. It really depends on. It'd be interesting to see how players react to it this league, but I still think it'll just undergo a huge redesign somehow.
Yeah, sure.
Or they'll just add delve and you have infinite dungeon underground. Doesn't really matter at that point.
Keep trying to push for delve.
Mate, they could just put delve in the way that it is in POE1 and nobody would care. They just feel like this is amazing.
All right, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time. I'm glad I finally got the opportunity to have you on. I got to call it, man. I got to get to work today. I know you're finishing out your day. Let people know where they can find you, how they can support your channel, all that.
Oh yeah, just type in Jorgen POE into YouTube, and you'll find me. The big Viking horns on the logo, and that's where I'll be. Otherwise on Twitch, just Jorgen_gaming or Jorgen Gaming, or just look for the Path of Exile 2.
When do you normally stream?
Usually 11 p.m. to about 2 a.m. most weeknights, and weekends are a little bit all over the shop. But yeah,
awesome, man. Hey, I appreciate it. And then I'll stop the. I know you're finishing out your day. Let people know where they can find you, how they can support your channel, all that.
Oh yeah, just type in Jorgen POE into YouTube, and you'll find me. The big Viking horns on the logo, and that's where I'll be. Otherwise on Twitch, just Jorgen_gaming or Jorgen Gaming, or just look for the Path of Exile 2.
When do you normally stream?
Usually 11 p.m. to about 2 a.m. most weeknights, and weekends are a little bit all over the shop. But yeah,
awesome, man. Thank you guys for watching another episode. I will be coming out with a build guide for what my league starter is going to be. minus the skill tree, obviously, but I just want to lay out a general framework of what I'm trying to go for. Don't forget to subscribe to Jorgen's channel. He is an awesome creator, and you guys can learn a lot by watching him. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.